C-SPAN 3. That's at 9 a.m. Eastern in about 10 minutes. Now, joining us to talk about free speech is the president and CEO of Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. It's called FIRE. He's also the co-author of The War on Words. Greg Lukianoff, welcome to the program.
Great to be back on.
So remind us about your organization, what the mission is and how it's funded.
So FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, has been around since 1999. And initially, we only focused on free speech and academic freedom threats on college campuses. But then in 2022, we decided we needed to expand well beyond campus. We're now a national free speech organization dealing with issues all across the board, all across the country. Unfortunately, business has been booming in the past several years. We have more cases than we know what to do with, and we are donor funded.
And what was happening in 1999 on college campuses that you felt that this organization was necessary?
Well, I didn't found the organization. It was founded by Harvey Silverglate and Alan Charles Kors, but I joined as the first legal director in 2001. But a lot of people do remember that there was I'd say the great age of political correctness on campuses from like 85 to 95, and that essentially this was when campuses that used to sort of venerate free speech started passing speech codes. And there was this big fight for about 10 years, and everybody thought it won, the free speech won, that it was all over. But unfortunately, when I started in 2001, a lot of the same speech codes that were passed in the heyday of political correctness in the 1980s were still on the books in campuses across the country. So we spent years trying to tell people that actually it's worse on campus than you think it is. And people only really started to notice after things got more intense again after, say, like 2014.
So explain what kind of speech is not protected by the First Amendment.
True threats are not protected, for example. That's been much in the news. But true threats are things that would make a reasonable person in fear of bodily harm or death. It's basically like, I'm going to kill you, and saying, you know, where someone lives. It's not just a vague idea that maybe someone's wishing you harm. For incitement to imminent lawless action is not protected, and that's kind of like, let's go burn down the mayor's office in a situation where you're likely to burn down the mayor's office. Defamation, you know, making a factual claim that someone has committed a crime, for example, saying that I know for a fact that you're a pedophile, and these are the details, particularly when you know you're lying, is pretty much always defamation. Obscenity, but that's defined as it's a convoluted explanation, but like extremely hardcore pornography is not protected the same way other forms of speech are protected.
Which is not necessarily defined. It's just what did the Supreme Court justice say? I'll know it when I see it.
I'll know that's Potter Stewart. Yeah, it's prurient interest, a word that you don't use otherwise. It's contemporary community standards. What actually counts as unprotected obscenity has shrunk a lot over the years, but it is still a category of unprotected speech. That's actually the one that I think the Supreme Court gets wrong. I believe that essentially, if it's sexual content and you're 18 or over, it should be protected.
Let me, going back to this concept of hate speech and political rhetoric, I want to play you White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. Mm-hmm. In light of the attempted shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, she was blaming essentially rhetoric, anti-Trump rhetoric, on that shooting. And here she is, and then I'll have you respond to it.
Sure.
This political violence stems from a systemic demonization of him and his supporters by commentators, yes, by elected members of the Democrat Party, and even some in the media. This hateful and constant and violent rhetoric directed at President Trump day after day after day for 11 years has helped to legitimize this violence and bring us to this dark moment. Those who constantly falsely label and slander the president as a fascist, as a threat to democracy, and compare him to Hitler to score political points are fueling this kind of violence. The left-wing cult of hatred against the president and all of those who support him and work for him has gotten multiple people hurt and killed, and it almost did so again this weekend. When you read the manifesto of this shooter, ask yourselves, How different is the rhetoric from this almost assassin than what you read on social media and hear in various forums every single day? The answer, if you're being honest with yourself, is that there is no difference at all. Much of the manifesto of the would-be assassin is indistinguishable from the words that we hear daily from so many.
What do you think? She said that hateful, violent rhetoric is legitimizing of the violence, and it's many people have been hurt by it, and the president could have been hurt as well.
So Carolyn Leavitt has every right to say that we think the rhetoric is at a fever pitch, or that that we think that ultimately people should be more thoughtful in the way they talk about things. The White House can say that, and that's okay. But the problem here is that, I recently wrote something on my Substack called The Eternally Radical Idea, where I just listed all the different unconstitutional actions this administration has taken against freedom of speech, particularly freedom of the press, whether it's through the FCC or through lawsuits or through other forms of action. And if Carolyn Leavitt was just criticizing the tenor of the way we argue today, that's fine. You can agree or disagree with her. But this administration has consistently gone after the press. It's consistently gone after its enemies every time they see an opening. And, First Amendment be damned in many cases.
If you've got a question for Greg Lukianoff on the First Amendment, on free speech, you can give us a call now. The lines are by party. Democrats are on 202-748-8000, Republicans 202-748-8001, and Independents 202-748-8002. You mentioned threats not being a form of protected speech. This brings us to the case against former FBI Director James Comey. He posted an image of seashells on the beach that spelled out 8647. The Justice Department has indicted him for threatening to kill the president.
Yeah.
Your take?
I think that's nuts.
Why?
Because the idea that seeing seashells arranged saying 8647 would place a reasonable person in fear of bodily harm or death barely passes the laugh test. And the idea that you would actually arrest someone for that is an escalation against his enemies that is very predictable from Trump. But I do not believe this is anywhere near a true threat. And by the way, 86, people are like, well, that means kill. It doesn't. In some old cartoons, I remember people saying 86 them, But 86 mostly, I think it came originally from restaurants. It's saying like 86 the mayo on this. I used to work in restaurants too, and yes, you actually did say that kind of stuff. So the idea that this is a credible threat is nonsensical.
Isn't there a different standard, though, for threats against the president than against you and me?
You still have to be able to show that you're talking about something that is sincere, that something that basically like this is part of some kind of plan or serious attempt to get someone killed. There are cases, there are Supreme Court cases that said, I believe, if I ever got a gun, the first thing I'd do would be shoot LBJ, is one famous case. That was found to be entirely protected. And I think that's much more explicit than someone seeing seashells on the beach that say 8647.
Now, concerning the press, I want to ask you about the Jimmy Kimmel issue. There's been two issues now. There was the comments he made following the shooting death of Charlie Kirk, and then recently, before the White House Correspondents' Dinner, about First Lady Melania Trump. The FCC has ordered a review of the license for ABC. What's your reaction to that?
Brendan Carr's FCC has been a disgrace when it comes to freedom of speech. Brendan Carr used to be someone who would say great things about freedom of speech before he was FCC commissioner. And he would talk about how the FCC should not be weaponized to punish First Amendment protected speech. But since he's been in charge, the abuse of the FCC's power has been rampant. So the first Jimmy Kimmel investigation, which was again in a situation where Charlie Kirk was murdered, it was horrifying, but unfortunately the administration took advantage of that tragedy to go after their political enemies. We saw dozens of cases of people getting in trouble across the country for saying things that were, in some cases, gross about, basically saying Charlie Kirk had it coming, or people saying things as tame as my opinion of Charlie Kirk is that I disagreed with him on any number of things. And they went after Jimmy Kimmel for making a joke related to the what he saw as the scrambling of the administration to prove that, I think as Jimmy Kimmel put it, that the shooter wasn't actually conservative. And that is absolutely protected speech. But Brendan Carr was on the record saying we can either do this the hard way or the easy way, clearly threatening FCC attacks. Meanwhile, Trump never, he must be the most frustrating client in the world, because you could sometimes get away with pretextual punishments on speech as long as you don't actually say, by the way, I'm going after you for your speech. Trump has been incredibly clear time and time again that the latest investigation of Jimmy Kimmel and of Disney broadcast, he's been very clear that this is about what you said, which of course is going to lead to them losing in court if this comes to court.
Let's talk to callers. We'll start with James, Madison, Wisconsin, independent. Good morning, James.